Pankaj Sharma, Schneider Electric's Global Executive Vice President, Secure Power Division, explains the company's innovative approach to delivering sustainable solutions for its customers, and suggests that data center revolution, not evolution, is the way forward.
In terms of Schneider Electric, your role, I mean, what do you see as the role in terms of helping data center owners and operators to decarbonize or more generally improve their sustainability? And I guess part of the question is, are you, I expect I know the answer, but are you passive? You do sit there and wait and a customer knocks on your door and says, help me, or are you actively sort of promoting the message, as you say, via some of your technology and innovations and trying to lead the industry and say, look, this is where you need to be? What's that sort of balance look like?
And again, Philip, great question. We don't think that our role is necessarily to sit down and just create technologies and wait. So obviously our role is to create technologies which have very little carbon emissions. So I can tell you with that level of detail, we have product environmental profiles for each one of our products, and our technologies, like the example of medium voltage switchgear or the free cooling systems and so on, which I'm talking about. This is, of course, a big part of the role which we play. But I think even bigger than that, the role we play is to educate the whole industry, or at least make an attempt to educate the whole industry. And that's why we come up with things like the White Paper 67. The White Paper 67 is not about talking about our technologies. The White Paper 67 is about how we can create a measure by which we can all build more sustainable data centers, because we all need to build more data centers. That's a fact, right? So that part is thought leadership and education, which we spend a lot of energy on. In fact, we have a whole science center which does work like that. And that science center has nothing to do with Schneider's technology. That science center is all about how we progress as an industry, right? So those are investments which we make as a company. We do that. We do a lot of speaking on this subject. I do a lot of speaking in this subject, not to sell Schneider technology, but to educate everybody on how to build sustainable data centers, right? And we give examples of some customers who work with us. We depend a lot on people like yourselves, right? I mean, you're the eyes and ears of the whole industry. So what you hear, whatever we try to explain to you, you make it much wider in terms of. So I think collectively we have to play a role for the company. Thought leadership, education, examples with White Paper 67, etc., is what we play a very important role in. Of course, our primary role remains to create technologies which are very little carbon emission, right? About or nothing. So that's we continue to do. But we also depend on our partners like yourselves to help further this message in the larger community.
Okay, and as you say, one of the more powerful ways, I guess, of getting the message across is via the old show and tell principle, I guess. So in terms of how you're helping customers, and I understand sensitivity wise, you might not be able to name names, but it'd be good to know the sort of work you've either done or you are currently doing, working with customers to help them on their, whether it's net zero aims or just improving their sustainability credentials.
Yeah, and there are customers. So, I mean, there are some we can talk to. I mean, like, for example, I was recently talking to Mark Kidd. He's the EVP of data centers for a company called Iron Mountain. They're a co-location data center company. I mean, they've used what we've sort of proposed, and they are building they have built some very solid sustainable operations, right? I mean, so it's not just talk. I mean, there are examples of those which are out there when our customers apply the methodology to build sustainable data centers, and they see the results of that, right? So like that, there are examples, and we are happy to share more.
Okay, and in terms of it might be unfair to ask you, but if you were awarding the industry a mark, I don't know, a percentage or a mark out of 10 for where it is at the moment, are we still in the relatively early days with sustainability programs, whether it's individual companies or there are various, was a climate neutral data center pact, there are various industry-wide initiatives. I say, are we early, or are we making very good progress?
I would dare not give a rating, I would say, but I think given the 5 parameters I spoke about, which are biodiversity, water, energy, greenhouse gas emissions, and so on, based on those 5 parameters, I think we still are, we are at early days, but at a very fast pace of application and willingness to execute. That's why I feel very confident about our industry. But if I just looked at PUE, I mean, we are at a very, very advanced stage as an industry overall, right? So that's why I think if you're really thinking sustainable data centers, you have to look at all those five. And from that perspective, we are at early days, right? Because we're just starting to apply these other parameters, which are not just PUE, but the things like water and biodiversity and waste and greenhouse gas emissions.
Okay, and in terms of where companies are on their sustainability roadmaps, if you like, are there any, and clearly there are different shapes and sizes of organization, but are there any basic sort of key objectives, metrics, etc., whatever, that people need to understand to make good progress? I say a standard framework to which they can add any individual circumstances they might have. So what advice would you give to people as they embark or carry on those journeys?
Yeah, look, and again, I've said this a few times already in this discussion, and I'm not saying this because it came from Schneider Science Center. I just think what we've helped pull together, which is called the White Paper 67, is a very good starting point. And in fact, as a company, for all our data center customers, if we just apply that and started to execute on it, that itself is a very good measure to build sustainable data centers. And again, I'm not saying this because it came from our science center. I just think that the amount of effort which has gone into building that, with the number of people who've put their entire data center experience into it and then looked at it from a sustainability lens, I think that's a good starting point, and hence the reason to create a framework like that. I would really urge all our customers and people who are listening to go look at the White Paper 67 and of course give us feedback as well, right? I mean, there's collective learning is what's important. It's not just us, right? But that, I think, is a very, very good starting point.
Okay, and I have to ask, I normally ask at the end of these kind of discussions, in terms of, I guess, the data center industry we're talking about today, but more generally, because obviously the world knows that, well, I think they know by now that they have to head towards net zero at a reasonable rate. Are you optimistic that the desire is there, the technologies are there, and we will move in the right direction at the right pace, or do you sometimes sort of wake up in the middle of the night and think, oh dear, this isn't perhaps going as well as it should be? What are your thoughts as to I suppose the impetus, the desire, and the likelihood of getting to where we need to be by, well, I guess 2050 is the ultimate goal, isn't it? But I know 2030 is a date for the data center industry as well. So.
Yeah. And look, I think the desire and willingness definitely there, right? Technology, I think partially, simply because technology change also takes time, right? I mean, when you redesign something with the right level of PEP, product environmental profile, it takes time. It doesn't happen overnight. And it needs investments, right? It also means that you have to put away money to do that level of design change versus something else you could have done, right, for faster revenues. So the technology is something which we are all working on, I think, as an industry. Are we there yet on technology? Not really. Is net zero data center a potential future by 2030 or 2050? That's a bit hard to say. But I think the important point is, I mean, it's almost like when you think about it, when you think of the grids, even today, globally, almost 70 to 80% of grids are burning fossil fuel, right? So the grid decarbonization program talks about it being less than 50% over the next 40 years, right? So that is that good enough? Yes, it's good enough to meet the 1.5, 1.7 degree goal, right? Is it the best we want to do? Not really, right? I mean, ideally you want to get to 10% or 15 or 20%, right? It's the same for the data center industry. Will we get to 100% net zero by 2030? I don't know. I hope we do, but I don't think it's going to be very easy to get to net zero. But I think if we can reduce our emissions substantially so that we are not with this multitude of growth in data center industry, and while we are at 2% emission, if that 2% goes down substantially, even we grow the data center business so much, I think that should be our aim, which is what I think we are sort of working towards. So net zero is a big word. Huh? Net zero is a very big word. I can tell you net zero, a lot of people are talking net zero and they don't realize what it takes to do net zero. and a lot of the world today is also on PPAs, carbon credits. Carbon credits are good, but it's like, you are doing something good, so I'm taking the advantage of that by paying you. But that doesn't mean I am doing the real decarbonization, right? So it's a mixed world out there.
And finally, maybe, do you think that we can carry on a sort of evolutionary approach, getting there, softly, or do you think there will need to be a revolution? I mean, I'm thinking, for example, Microsoft. I can't remember the name of the project, but they did a research project where they basically put a containerized data center at the bottom of the sea somewhere, and worked out whether that. I mean, do you think we're going to have a radical sort of, as I say, whether all the data centers end up in the Arctic Circle or under the ocean to achieve what we need to, or is that just never going to happen? So as you alluded to, we might not ever get to a net zero data center, but as long as we can make significant improvements, that'd be good enough.
I mean, Philip, think about big picture. If we were just think about where the regular evolution has gotten us to. I mean, the reality is just the regular evolution is the reason why we are where we are, right? I mean, so I don't think regular evolution is going to help any industry, including data center industry. It means radical change, both on design, innovation, thinking, willingness, target setting, and processes. It needs that. If we just keep thinking, for example, innovation from a regular evolutionary point of view, are we going to get there by 2030 or 2050? No, I don't think so. So radical shift is required. Now, does that mean putting data center inside the water and some of these other examples are giving? I don't know. I don't know about that, right? Because this is where radical innovation on technology is key. But it's not a regular evolutionary innovation which we do every year, right? So that's really my point. But there are ways to do it. I gave you the example of the medium voltage switchgear. Like that, I can give you 20 other examples of just our own company, because I know all these areas we're working on. But these are not like regular shifts. When we were thinking of the medium voltage switchgear on air, it was not an evolutionary type of innovation. It was like, okay, how do you just get rid of it completely? What do you do, right? And the first answer is no, it's not possible, because you've done that for 100 years. No, but we just want to get rid of it completely, right? So that's radical thinking.
And I promise this is the final one, because you give me a lot of your time, for which I'm very grateful. But do you also think that there may eventually, and I know it's difficult for governments because they don't want to be public, but do you think there might be pushback against the digital world? For example, I expect we're both old enough to remember the different ways that media was delivered to us, or you go and rent a video or a DVD, whereas now people expect to stream high definition movies onto their mobile phone, which isn't, as an activity, particularly environmentally friendly. Do you think at some stage what digital consumers take for granted will be pushed back, or does the industry and all industries have to kind of work around the given that if consumers want something, no matter how environmentally unsound it might be, the supply base has to pick up the the environmental responsibility?
But look, this is where partnership is key, right? Public-private partnership. And in fact, there are some examples of that. In fact, there was one large metaverse data center to be built in actually a country in Europe, where it was approved and that got rejected because the amount of energy it needed was more than half of all the data centers ever built in that country, right? So there is already pushback on that. But the key here is, when you think of the digital economy, or let's just say not even economy, just the whole digital boom, the digital desire for all these applications which we are talking about, if the data centers cannot be built in a sustainable manner, then the governments will obviously push back, right? Because it's almost like, how much energy are you going to give a data center versus to give to people in their homes? When there's winter, you need to heat the homes. Would you put energy there, or would you rather give them a metaverse experience, right? So it's a difficult equation. That's why this whole discussion we are having around building sustainable data centers is very important. As long as we can continue to build the sustainable data centers, the governments will continue to support the experience compute brings out of these data centers. And I think that partnership is important. So it's even more important for the data center industry to, if we want to sustain this kind of growth, we have to build sustainable data centers, and we have to move really fast, right? We cannot wait for this to happen, because at one stage, if they are not sustainable, the data centers, and the governments will have to push back because the energy consumption is going to be very high.
Okay, I mean, we covered a fair amount of ground, and Pankaj, you've given us some great insights. So I do really appreciate your time. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you.
Thank you, Philip. And feel free to ask us more questions offline if there's something else you need to go deeper into, and we'll be happy to answer those.
Okay, that's lovely. Thanks again.